Problem number 7. Okay, so write a function once again. Function z equals function calculation x comma y. All of your exam problems won't be functions. You'll have about half functions, half script files, so just keep that in mind. So write a function that takes in 2 inputs, x and y, as 2 vectors of arbitrary lengths. The function must determine the number of elements in x vector, which is m, and the number of elements in y vector n. So I'm going to go ahead and calculate those right away. So m would be the length of x, and then n would be the length of y, just because I know how the text is written. It's written in terms of n and m. So I'm going to just identify that in my program right away. The function must determine the number of elements in your x vector, the number of elements in your y vector. If the m and n are equal, the function is going to calculate this. Note it's z, x, y. Generally, that means that we're going to have a 2-dimensional vector, where x is going to be used along the rows, essentially, and y is going to be used along the columns. So, once again, just like it was for the previous problem, it makes sense to use a for loop. So for I equals 1 to m, all my x values, and then for j equals 1 to n, or my y values. Then I'm going to do my calculation. So z is going to be the size of m comma n. That's how big it's going to be. And then we calculate. Zi comma j equals 0.6 times x of I, so the ith value in x cubed, times exp, negative 0.47, 0.47, times my jth y vector, plus 1.5 times my jth y vector squared, times exp of negative 0.6 times my ith x vector, x value. This is essentially what that calculation looks like using nested loops. I'm going to do each calculation separately. Where x has I values, y has j values. So z is going to be an m by n matrix, where all my x values are essentially the rows and my y values are the calculations for the columns. So this is one way to do it. Save. You don't have to do it this way. You could fill in each row at a time. So you could do this, or each row, a column at a time. So take out your I loop. And you can say that z, I, all rows, is going to be times y. Note, this needs to be element by element. So go through and add your period in front of all your division signs, your multiplication signs, and your exponents, even if you don't need them. Just cover your back. You could also do it in terms of columns. You could also do it this way, where go through all your columns, where you have your x values. Once again, element by element, so put a period in front of all your stuff. Okay, let's test it, see what happens. I'm gonna print out z at the end of here, z at the end of here, and z at the end of here, just to make sure I'm getting all of the right calculations and doing everything correctly. So initialize z to 0 in all locations. Okay, so I've got something, let's call my function. Z equals function, calculation, 1 to 5, 1 to 5. So the same size, I'm not gonna do 1 to 5, 1 to 5. I'm gonna do 1 to 5, and then 6 to 10. Okay, so I had an error, I'll deal with that later. This is what Z looked like with my nested for loops. This is what Z looked like when I filled in each row at a time. This is what Z looked like when I filled in each column at a time. Note, they are the same. Woohoo, did something right. I'm gonna keep my last one. Okay, that's part of it. That is part of it. I have something else to do in this text. So it says if m and n are equal, then error is 0 and z is calculated. If m and n are not equal, then error is 1 and z is all zeros. So I need to go ahead and add an if statement. So if m equals n, and that's when I do this calculation, so error equals 0. If you ever want to indent all of your code, just highlight it all, you can click this indent button up here. You can also click Control I. I need an else, so error equals 1, and z equals 0's m, comma n. So they're the same length. Everything's fine, do my calculation. They're not the same length, then I can't do my calculation. So I'm gonna test it. So, test it. I tested it there. Okay, so there's no error anymore. Let's test it to see if they're different numbers. So 1 to 10. So error is 0 and z is full of zeros. Okay, last piece in here, it says display your results. Our first display of the practice problems. It doesn't say what to use. So use your display, use your results, or whatever your format is, as a guide for which function to use. Here, you're printing things out more or less as a table. If you're just doing a table, and you don't need to know how many digits there are past the decimal place, I encourage you to use disp. So disp, my first line is going to be x, my second line is going to be y, and then I've got a bunch of z values. And then I'm just going to display my results. So I'm going to place my x vector next to my y vector, next to my z vector. There's probably going to be some concatenation issues there, but I will deal with that when I test my code. Okay, so let's test it. I should probably, yeah, let's test it. Nope. I'm going to move this into here. So it's going to display if it's correct. Okay, so let's test it. Let's see if they're correct. This one. Okay, so unrecognized function variable x. I called it x. Should I have called it lowercase x, lowercase y? There we go. Okay, try it again. Okay, dimensions of arrays being concatenated are not consistent. X is a row and Y is a row. So I want to go ahead and transpose those. There we go. We have something printed out. I'm going to shorten my vectors here. 1 by 3, and then 8 to 10. Something's not... Semicolon there. Okay, so there's my x values, my y values, and my z values. I can go ahead and just do that, scoot it over. You don't necessarily have to do this for your exam. If you're running out of time, don't worry about aligning things. If you have time, sure, align things. Come on. Okay, there we go. That's getting better. There we go. Let's just say that's what it is. Okay, my x values, my y values, and my z values. If you're not told which one to use whichever one makes you more comfortable. I could do the same thing with fprintf. I could say fprintf. And then copy and paste this in. Don't forget your \n. You have a little bit more control over the spacing with fprintf. I could then say fprintf. I want my numbers, my first row to look like this. I want it to be my x value, %.0f, followed by my y value, %0f, followed by my z values. But that's going to change. It's going to differ. So this one, it really makes sense to use disp, but you can use fprintf. It just might take a little bit more massaging in order to do that. There we go. We have our function.